Hmm. Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Ken Vandermark, and I'm here with Mia Friedman and Andy Allen to talk about their music with Holodeck. This is part of the Options series. We're going to stream some of their concert, actually their whole duo concert from performance that took place last August, I think, last year at Experimental Sound Studio in Chicago. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between live interview and discussion to this performance, talk about the performance, about the work they're doing now. And thanks a lot for joining us, both of you guys.
Thanks for having us.
It's an honor to chat with you. I've been a fan for a while as a sax player, so.
Yeah, that's the special group of us that deal with these instruments. So the performance was originally in two parts, two longer sections, roughly 20 minutes each, give or take. And I kind of broke it down into four sections, four segments that I kind of want to talk about a little bit before we hit them, just to discuss what I am seeing in them and why I found the performance so exciting. There was some publicity that went out about the concert, and maybe I should just talk about it now for people tuning in. The Holodeck concert last year was one of the standout performances on the Option series, I thought, and I was really unfamiliar with the work of the group. Andrew Clinkman, who helps co-curate the series with me and with Tim Daisy, brought you guys in, and I loved the concert so much, and going back and listening to the performance and going through it again confirmed how really special and unique the music is on a lot of levels. I don't want to give a lot away for people who don't know the music, haven't heard you guys before. I'd like to just hit people with it, but there's a couple things that are really amazing to me to consider, and one is the sources of material are quite extreme in terms of not just diversity, but they're not musical sources that people would normally put together, or at least I wouldn't think of normally putting together, which makes it so unique, and it works so well. So part of the thing in it is, I guess, more traditional, connected to Appalachian mountain music, and then things with history connected to 60s free jazz or completely improvised music, let's say coming out of Europe. There's elements of extended technique, which I associate more with European free improvisation, to make big generalizations. But also there's like use of analog recording, like cassettes, manipulating cassette in real time, recording, I think is it sampled or cassette, Andy?
It's all cassette.
It's all cassette.
And well, I use a drum machine a little bit too. And
in terms of the recording that you're doing in real time, you're using cassette.
There's also a loop pedal that I use a little bit.
Okay.
It's a lot of cassette. I have 3 cassette players usually.
Okay. So that's where most of that process is coming. So you got that going. You're also using, like, let's say, newer technology, i.e. the loop pedal, drum machine. There's vocal elements. There's a lot of use of almost all the time with the violin and with the reed instruments, which Andy plays. The string instruments are played by Mia. Very frequently, things aren't monophonic. There's always like connection with overtones, and I want to ask about that after this first segment. But there's a highlight moment in it for me, somewhere towards the middle. There's a sudden stop, which is not an ending, and it doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like an intentional pause with a lot of tension after it. So you're really riveted, I feel, as a listener. And then the music comes back in again, and it's almost like a tape splice or a cut. It's very effective. And I want to talk about that after we hear the segment. So Alex Inglesian, master behind the curtain, if you could start the first segment, please. Maybe.
Catalytic mind, catalytic sometimes, catalytic breath, catalytic treasure catalytic mind, catalytic sometimes, catalytic breath, catalytic treasure
presents us moment by moment in having a sense of unity of all things. It's because you're subject to all sorts of subtle pains that make it impossible for us to relax enough so that we can be consistently merging with the world around us. So when we sit there, those subliminal aches and pains that are responsible for lifelong powerful negative behavior patterns and also responsible and also prevent us from seeing the perfection of each moment. Those aches and pains
Okay, that was the first section. Yeah, totally remarkable stuff. Really incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, just the basic components that you're working with? How did you arrive? Let's forget about the aesthetic part, but just the technical part. How did you arrive at the instrumentation? I mean, for you, Mia, because of the other kind of music you do with the fiddle, with banjo, I mean, okay, and then also with the reeds, Andy, but like the other components, like the cassettes, the drum machine, these things, how did you guys arrive at this construction?
Well, we so we were together for a year or two as a couple before we started playing a lot, and I remember specifically we were trying to think of like what our band should be, or like you know, we went to NEC and there's a lot of like what's the concept kind of talk, and what we couldn't think of what the concept was for a band or whatever. But then we realized like we're both doing cool stuff. What if we just start playing together? And so like at the time I was doing solo stuff that was with like a table like that with cassettes and a loop pedal and a drum machine. I had a similar setup for my solo stuff, but it was more just collage music mixed with free jazz.
You're playing the reed instruments, you know, the stuff you're playing. So that part actually was kind of coming out of your solo music, Andy.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you kind of brought these two territories together.
We were just like, what if it's maybe a juxtaposition, maybe it's not, let's just see what happens. And it kind of, it started to work pretty quickly. And
yeah. Okay. And I was wrong technically. It wasn't a full stop, but there's this moment early in where the violin and flute just totally like, I mean, catch. So what's the story on that?
Total luck. Total.
Wow. It's really every time I see it now, it's the third time. It's like, whoa, because it's so sharp. I mean, it's so on target.
I think it's like the end of like a verse or a part of the song where we know that sometimes like we know that I'm gonna fill, there's gonna be like a space before the next vocal section, and we know that I'm gonna fill it with like a tape or something, but sometimes either the silence happens or sometimes it's even by accident where like I didn't get the tape up in time, or I think that one was intentional.
Well, the tape's going. I mean, I forgot that. I was so struck by the stop of the conventional instruments together that I kept like, I forgot that this other stuff was taking place until just seeing it now. I was like, wait a minute, there's something happening. But it's so fascinating, like your communication. Because how long have you been working together as Holodeck? It's years now, right?
Yeah. So I think we started playing together in like late 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 7 years ish. Yeah. And that's that. I mean, in my experience, those kinds of really special moments of communication, which are, I mean, to me, it really comes out of almost nowhere. I mean, maybe it was towards the end of a verse or a phrase that you guys know, but definitely it's very surprising each time I've heard it. So that kind of experience can happen when you've never played with somebody before. But definitely, I feel like those things come out of communication systems that have been built up over time, that you feel the music in a certain way together. You're playing it like together, even if it's, you know, completely improvised in that moment.
Yeah.
Really
Definitely.
special. really
Yeah, I
special.
think we have a similar sense of like how elastic we want certain phrases to be or whatever. We just kind of feel it a similar way now.
Mhm. And with the end of that, that section, I mean, definitely the piece continues after where we stopped. But to me, it felt like there was a shift that comes up where we paused it, where it goes into different instrumentation, and this moment where the tape's playing and the person's talking. Is that a specific reference in the tape that you wanted to get across, or is that just a random selection? Or because there's a kind of absurd Dada quality to it, which is fantastic, but I didn't know how pre-planned that was. Like, is this tape the one that goes with this piece, or
Yeah,
different?
well, I've been planning them more and more, and there's a lot we could talk about with the different tapes, but that particular one, I think, was a meditation tape. I use a lot of like meditation tapes, and it's partly because I like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a non-funny, it's like a non-irony kind of thing, where like I've seen people use that kind of stuff as like an ironic. I've been to a lot of like noise concerts and stuff, noise shows, and seen people use that kind of stuff as like an ironic thing, whereas I'm like a meditator using it. So I'm like, it's kind of like this non-ironic thing. It's just, I don't know how to describe it, but
It doesn't have a specific reference to a conventional narrative. It's not a story in a conventional sense. It's not informational like a news story in a conventional sense. It's text, it's language, but it's also kind of, by doing that, it's also kind of abstracted. You start hearing, at least for me listening to it in the performance, it's not like, you can't really hear it as like an article being written or a narrative being read aloud. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like words as sonic content.
yes,
Like, you know, like rhythm. It's not what's being said; it's kind of how it's being said.
The tone of it is very like even. And
I
Right.
think the tape player kind of as like an instrument, you know,
Yeah.
and I draw a lot of influence from one of my best buddies, Arkham Foam, ARKM Foam, because he's somebody who he uses tapes as, I would say, like his primary instrument.
Okay.
And I call him the Christian Marclay of tapes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I'm a big Christian Marclay fan too. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. And is he based? Because you guys are based in Western Massachusetts, correct?
Yeah, he is
Yeah.
too. His family lived with us for a year, which was really fun. And now
Oh, wow. So, and did you guys do some collaborations with him, or just sort of, you know, get to know each other's music, but not so specifically like working together?
we're in bands together.
Oh, okay.
Both of us. We're like best buddies. He used to live with us, so we have a lot of different projects involved.
And he's still based out in that part of the country, same area still? Okay, and from what Andrew told me, there's like a pretty cool and active, let's say, experimental music scene, for lack of a better term, kind of based in that region right now. There's a lot of cool
Really
things
good.
happening.
Yeah, it's spread out. Like our one of our favorite venues is 10 Forward in Greenfield, Mass, which is about 50 minutes away from us, but it's worth it. We just have to drive together.
Yeah. Well, it takes about that long to get to some of my gigs in Chicago sometimes.
That's a good point, right?
You know, the traffic is so bad.
It's a really diverse scene here too. Like there's a lot of just amazing, like very unique songwriter type people, and then there's a lot of great improviser. It's not a huge scene, but it's pretty diverse and pretty just cool.
And would you say the music of Holodeck, not so much the reception on the scene per se in that area, but do you think it is representative of the kinds of thinking that are going on? When you say there's interesting songwriters, I mean, does that connect to your, let's say, music, Mia, outside of Holodeck more, or is it, you said like experimenters, like how does what Holodeck, is that part of like an aesthetic that's being generated there, or kind of a unique group among other unique groups?
I mean, a lot of the shows we play, we're not really, there's not like other bands that sound like us or anything. But I feel like we fit in our own kind of way. I mean, we definitely started making music that's along the lines of what we're doing when we were still in Boston. So but I mean, we're always influenced by people here, but I don't think it's like, you wouldn't hear our band and be like, that's what.
Right. Okay. I guess that's what I was trying to ask. Is that like
Yeah.
a specific
that close to
aesthetic? It's not quite like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some like improvised bands out here that we've been inspired by and stuff, but
Mhm.
that have a certain sound to them. But
Mhm. But yeah, you guys are definitely on your own tangent, unique tangent. So the next section coming up in this piece, which overall I would say is around a 20-minute piece. So I've been kind of breaking it down into smaller chunks, which hopefully doesn't damage the overall feeling too much. This one focuses on banjo and voice and recorder. As I mentioned, there's like a lot of really interesting overtone stuff like on the recorder. It was crazy. And how the banjo and voice in this section double, which is also pretty fascinating. So there's like all this doubling going on, or a multiplicity of sound going on. So even though there's the two of you on the more conventional instruments and voice, there's a density happening with it that's really interesting. Then with these other layers going on. Recently, I saw the Cunningham documentary that came out at the end of last year, and there's some really nice stuff in it. At some moment, someone's being critical. Cage and Cunningham are on tour with the dance group in Europe in the, I think, mid 60s on their big tour. And I think they're in Germany, and someone's like kind of accusing them of not making any sense or some typical thing like that. And Cage says, the problem is you're trying to think in a line, and it's not a line, it's a field. And I was struck by that listening to your music, because it really, that's a very good description for me anyway, of what's happening, because there is like an unfolding, and because music is a time-based art form, it is going to move chronologically from, when it starts, minutes passing, which gives an implication of maybe a line of progression, because it's the way we perceive time on some super general level. But in terms of activity, you've got all these fragmented moments happening with things going through that, maybe with the tapes, stuff starting up and slowing down. There's all these layers happening simultaneously, and it's definitely a field activity to me. Do you feel that way about it, or are you not even considering that when you make it?
I really like that. I feel like I do think about it that way. I've just never used that metaphor of the field. This song is sourced from a shape note piece called Hallowell, the one we're about to listen to, which is taken from this old church singing tradition called sacred harp singing. And yeah, we totally kind of like pieced it or took it apart. And yeah, like kind of elasticized it, and it definitely does feel that way to me.
Okay. Well, let's take a listen to that. Alex, if you could cue up this next section, that would be fantastic.
Patterns, and also responsible, and also prevent us from seeing the perfection of each moment. Those aches and pains go from being completely unconscious and incorporate up and we become conscious. And then it's an interesting kind of pain, because the deeper you go into meditation, the more you're aware of the pain. That's why there's one teacher that calls it samadhi pain. Okay, it's the pain that gets stronger when you go into concentration in that region. actually hardly more.
Spirit flew over furthest field.
Believe it or not. Okay.
Now I see them can't leave behind.
That pain is so deep and so unconscious.
A scrap of light, a broken smile.
Real, but
The remnants by which I might be.
and by however, they'd rather face that pain, they'd rather face the pain of a truncated life and a horse.
Lift me up, the brightest sky of clouds below me race. The dead lift me up. I see them face to face.
A lot easier than trying to pick yourself up.
Too high.
In other words, what I'm saying is that negative behavior patterns and negative perception
People in I am no man.
those patterns go
Mountain flowers, the desert
patterns of behavior become patterns of sensation. And that
surround me now, comfort me now. For dreaming clouds below me. The dead lift me up. I see them face.
Those go through limited forces to actual body sensations. Patterns of behavior become patterns of sensation.
That ending's so great. Patterns of behavior. I mean, was that a tape you mentioned, picking specific tapes? Is that like a planned component there, or is that a chance that it ended where it did?
I don't remember. Sometimes I rewind it to a specific spot to try to get like a quote I like, but I don't remember if I did it for that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful ending, man. For people tuning in, I should reiterate, we're listening to the music of Holodeck and talking to the two musicians involved, Mia Friedman and Andy Allen. Fantastic to have you back, so to speak, and for you to participate in the Option Archive interview program that's taking place now. We're about midway through their set that they played last year at Experimental Sound Studio. And let's see, I'm just going to check on it took place July 22nd last year. And it was definitely a highlight for me on the series, which has been filled with lots and lots of highlights. Incredible program to be involved with. And I'd like to thank Experimental Sound Studio for doing the quarantine concerts during this period, for the work they've done before that, definitely what will take place afterward. I'd like to mention that you can contribute money towards the music of Holodeck with Andy and Mia by going to ess.org, and you can donate there as a way to get some money into these pockets during this period where concerts, as we know, have been really canceled for the ongoing period. And we're trying, ESS is doing an amazing thing with quarantine concerts to raise money for musicians who are still creating great things during this time. So thanks to both of you, Andy and Mia, for being involved. Thanks to ESS and for everyone tuning in. Please donate if you can. It really does make a huge difference for everybody who's involved in these performances. And for the next few Monday nights, the archive series of Option will include these interviews. Next week, Macy Stewart will be participating. We'll be talking about her duo music with Leah Cole. But right now, in a very professional way, let's get back to Holodeck. And I'd like to mention this record, which is great. If I can get it in there, it's probably, hopefully it's not backwards. It's the All the Roots Out record, which is your second release, correct?
Yeah,
Exactly.
and before we forget, just shout out to Feeding Tube Records and Ted Lee. And just, we were talking about Western Mass music before. There's a lot of it is on Feeding Tube. A lot of the best stuff is on Feeding Tube Records. Not all of them, but it's definitely worth exploring their catalog. So.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for letting us know about that. And maybe we could talk a little bit about the differences between the performance we're looking at and listening to now. The second record, which the pieces are more concise. They seem more, for lack of a better term, kind of song-based, like built around a song more directly and with less deconstruction and expansion, which is taking place more in this performance. And you mentioned you're working on your third record or working toward it now, and it may be more in the direction of what we're hearing at this time, more expansive. Can you talk a little bit about the direction of the group, its evolution, but also how you approach recording versus performing live?
Yeah, I feel like a few years ago, or even, as early as 1 year ago, it really was more song-based, like little 3 or 4 minute songs that were very, for the most part, through composed. We've always had an element of improvisation in our songs, I think always. But yeah, I think especially when we went on tour last summer and a bit before then, we were like, what if we just don't have an ending, really? Like, what if we just let it flow and kind of open up the song at its seams and just improvise way more? And that felt really good. And kind of going from one song into the next, which we did at Option Series, and kind of improvising between them and within them.
I think also like Mia said, we've always improvised a lot in our band. One thing that I notice in general in my life and especially in Holodeck is improvisations often feel longer when you're the person doing them than they do when you listen back. At least, I don't know if you feel that way, but so we'll do a song and let's say we end the song. There's like one song, I can't remember which one it is, but we tend to always end it with bass, clarinet, and violin alone without the tapes and stuff. And and it's improvised at the end. And every time we finish playing, we're like, was that too long at the end? And then people in the audience are like, that should have been way longer. And then we look back and we're like, that should have been way longer. So we're trying to like lean in that direction more and just try to relax into the improvisations a little more. So because it just feels better for us, and I think it sounds better. So.
Now, how are you going to approach that? You said you're just sort of, if I understood right, starting the work on the third record, maybe just developing the material or whatnot. How are you going to, do you have ideas about how you'll do that in the studio? Because that's one thing, especially with more open improvisation, that can be, in my experience, tricky in the studio. If you don't have an audience,
Yeah,
I mean, definitely I've had great experiences recording completely improvised music in the studio. There's no question about that, but it's also really different than when you're playing an improvised music concert. So do you have ways of thinking about what you might do?
We're working on it. I definitely feel that. It feels really different for me. I like feel a little tighter, I think, when we're recording, and kind of more stuck to what I normally do or whatever in the song.
Mm-hmm.
So just being conscious of that is helpful. And yeah, kind of just working to combat that, because it feels better when we can get to that other more open place.
I mean, I don't know if this is too personal a question, but considering that we're all kind of stuck at home right now, is this something that you guys are in a way taking advantage of to work on this stuff and explore it? Because that's something, I mean, you are in a weird environment, like all of us kind of, and maybe that helps with the process, or you haven't really thought about it that way.
Well, we've been working on stuff. Sometimes it's hard to get going, but we've definitely worked on stuff. So our first album, so the one you held up, that's our second album.
Mm-hmm.
Our first album we recorded on a 4-track back when we were in Boston, a cassette 4-track. And it seems like our third one is also going to be that. We kind of already have done a bunch of recording on that. So that's one thing we've been able to work on during this time. And we've been writing some new stuff that might be later, like after the third album. So
okay, so you're well, that's an interesting thing too, is like I always wonder about that for me, making the records, they're not really the end game. They're like a point in a process, really. So I find it interesting you mentioned you're working on your third, but you're already thinking about your fourth and how that might be. Is that the way you guys kind of work in general?
Yeah, well, I think we had actually that tour in July, and also some of the shows after that, we were doing a group of songs and we wanted to make sure we documented those.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them are old, actually. So we're going to hear 4 songs tonight.
Mm-hmm.
2 of those will be on the third album. And then
Okay.
there's 2 more that you're not going to hear tonight. But those 4 kind of felt like a period for us. So we want to make sure we capture those 4. And because there's only 4, we want to try to stretch them out, and hopefully that'll help it feel more like a live experience to have more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the newer stuff just feels like it's something different because we're starting to write it now versus having written it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing I love about the way you work, I'm fascinated by I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but it's like, let's say the components, like each piece, like the next section, the third section we're going to go to, features bass clarinet, and I believe it comes back to violin.
Yeah, so those are kind of two pieces in my mind, the way that.
Okay, and I think that the way you organize your pieces is great and very effective to my ears, because okay, this is what the things are going to be, but then you put them in these contexts that are extremely surprising, like they're rethought in a way. It's like in that last piece with the banjo. And I wanted to ask about that. You said it was a Sacred Heart music out of that tradition. Is that tradition, is the vocal duplicate the phrasing on the banjo, or is it something else?
Not at all. Actually, in that tradition, there's no, it's only voices. So
Oh, okay. Okay, so the piece was a vocal piece that you guys adapted for other
Yeah.
instruments. So, oh, I see. But like even in that, you know, you have the banjo and then this vocal line, and you think, oh, it's that, and then the recorder starts, and it's like almost textural. Then later, it turns into a very active kind of flow, and then the banjo gets totally deconstructed and broken apart. But it's all the parts that you brought in. Like it's like in a theater piece, like where you've been introduced to the characters, and these are the characters, but you're not really sure, are those the characters? Like the banjo, hearing banjo played that way, which starts off, let's say, in a quote unquote maybe more traditional manner. You know, I can recognize it as being connected to a certain kind of tradition, let's say. By the end of that piece, it's in a totally different universe.
Yeah.
It's still the piece. It doesn't feel like the piece has disappeared. It's just been reconfigured and transformed in a really kind of exciting way, definitely an exciting way. And I love the way the two of you do this. And then this next section, Alex, the third part, which I already said features bass clarinet. There's some really, we've already heard the use of tape machine, but in this one, it's fascinating because you start recording the bass clarinet that you play, and then you manipulate that and play simultaneously. So you have this very cool thing that goes on that hasn't happened yet, but is using the components that we've already visited, so to speak.
Yeah, the tape is of me playing bass clarinet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also playing bass clarinet live. Then I'm also using a loop pedal
Ah.
on the tape and on the microphone. So there's just multiple layers of bass clarinet. And also, I'm sure like you can hear it in almost every song that we really like we're not academic about it, but we really like kind of the intonation play and like getting those difference tones.
Mm-hmm.
So my tape players are so imperfect that I don't have to try too hard to get a rub between the taped bass clarinet and the real bass clarinet.
Uh-huh.
You know, that rub that I like. So.
It's the perfect technology for what you want to do.
It really is.
And I also have a pitch wheel on the tape player, so I can change the
Okay.
tape as much as I want.
In
Yeah.
case you have to like,
In case it's too correct. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I when I saw you perform, and even now seeing it again, you know, the third time through, you know, I have to admit, it doesn't matter if it's a conventional instrument or someone using different kinds of technology, unconventional technology, whatever it might be. When someone can use the tools and really use them, it's not like a gimmick. It's not like that's a funny noise. Like that they can, already you've done a huge amount to my commitment to want to listen. So like when you go to the tapes and you can run all this stuff in real time, you know, interact, like, you know, play the flute with one hand, have this going, and it doesn't feel like it's shtick. It feels like this is what you have to do, and you're totally nailing it. It's like Ross on Rolling Kirk. You know, he I think had a hard time being taken as seriously as he should have as like a genius, because it like this guy who's blind, he's doing circular breathing, he's got like 6 horns hanging off of him, and if people would just the people who just thought, oh, that's just like a funny gimmick that he can play 3 lines at the same time. If they could just close their eyes and listen to what's happening, they would understand this is not a gimmick. This is how he had to make his music. And you can hear it realized in all these different ways, the different records that he made through his career. But like this is definitely coming across with the stuff you guys do. It's like you have complete command of these tools, and then you take them somewhere amazing musically. So let's listen to this third part and see what I'm talking about, because this bass clarinet stuff with the tapes and loop pedal and knob, different tone knob. I want one of those. I want a different tone knob too. Okay, thanks. Cue it up, Alex.
You can't see them from here. Over. You're gonna want to take your car if you're headed over there. You can actually circle behind the garage. You can't see them from here. It's a U-shaped driveway. No, it looks like it ends, but it's actually a U-shaped drive. You're gonna want to take your car if you're headed over there. You can actually circle behind. We have more trees and fields. You can't see them. It's a U-shaped driveway. You can't see them. It's actually a U-shaped drive. You're gonna want to take your car if you're headed over there. You can actually circle. We have just circle behind the garage and go straight across from the other side. That way you don't have to back up into traffic. It's actually a U-shaped drive. You can just circle around the garage and go straight across the street from the other side. We have more trees and fields. You can't see them. It's a U-shaped drive. Just circle behind the garage and go straight across from the other side. That way you don't have to back up into traffic. Just circle around. We have more trees and fields. You can't see them. It's a U-shaped drive. It's actually a U-shaped drive. You're gonna want to take your head over. You can actually circle. We have more trees and fields. It's a U-shaped drive. Follow the dirt road about a quarter mile. No, not the field you can see from here. It's way over east. There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way. It's way over. Do you have four-wheel drive? There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way. It's way over. Do you have four-wheel drive? There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way. It's way over. Do you have four-wheel drive? There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way. It's way over. You can actually do you have four-wheel drive? There'll be people working over there. No, it looks separate stations with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way. It's way straight across. Do you have four-wheel drive? There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and not the field you can see from there. It's way over east. There'll be people working over there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Yeah, just take your car and circle behind the garage. You can pay over there. It shouldn't be too muddy on the way there. Do you have four-wheel drive? We have more trees and fields. You can't see them from here. So you're going to want to take your car if you're headed over there. You can actually circle behind the garage. It's a U-shaped driveway. I know it looks like it ends, but it's actually a U-shaped driveway. Just circle behind the garage and go straight across to the other side. That way you don't have to back up into traffic. Just circle around the garage and go straight across the street from the other side. Follow the dirt road about a quarter mile, not the field you can see from here. It's way over east. there'll be people working there. It's like a whole separate station with saws and everything. Just take your car and circle behind the garage.
So that's kind of a maybe arbitrary place to stop the piece because it's definitely going somewhere pretty important.
We basically played 4 songs, and you found all the spots. So.
Oh, you're making me feel very good. No, I mean they're so effective connected. You know, I was just trying to find some room to talk around them a little bit. But man, another thing is just the musicianship. It's like you're doing all these like kind of superficial, kind of archaic things, like with the machines, you know, and doing this. It's like mad science, like in the best sense. Mad science, like mad scientist, mad science, and then you let a rip in that section on the violin and bass clarinet. You've got all this. I mean, so it's such incredible use of display of tools and mechanisms. I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. is so phenomenal. We're with Andy Allen and Mia Friedman of Holodeck, talking to them about their music. Please donate some money if you can. It's super appreciated. It'll go to both of them to help them during this period. Just go to ess.org, and it's easy to donate for them. Thanks to ESS for doing the quarantine concerts and including the option series on this program, a series of performances live. And in this case, we've got some pre-recorded music of Holodeck, but also talking to them now in person, so to speak. And next week, I'll be talking to Macy Stewart about her music and the duo with Leah Cole. But before we go to the last section of material, I'd like to let people know that they can ask questions, and we'll bring these over to Andy and Mia at the end of the performance this evening. So definitely, dial in and let us know. Let them know what you're thinking about or what you might have questions about. In regards to that last piece, I had a question, which was the text that you were reading, Mia. What was that?
That was a poem written by Andy Allen over here.
Holy crap. Wow.
It's kind of funny. We live in the house that Andy's grandparents built in the 1940s.
Okay.
And it's on a Christmas tree farm that Andy and his dad still kind of run. So the poem is pretty much verbatim, I think, like exactly what Andy tells the customers every Christmas, like about how our driveway and
Oh, fantastic.
There's like two sections of the farm. One is near the house and the other is what we call over east. So you drive down like a dirt road to get to the other, and my dad's always at the other section. So part of my job when we're selling Christmas trees is to repeatedly tell people the same thing, because you can't see the other fields over east. So I have to describe to them how to get there, and it's like this whole speech that I give.
You wrote it down for posterity. but okay, this is my second part of the question. That's fantastic, because it works so well and when it loops on itself, and you've got this circular rhythm going with the vocal, and it's piling up and the words come out at different times. My question is the improvisation that the two of you get into with the overlapping phrasing between the violin and bass clarinet towards the end of that stretch. Is that guided all by the reading or the poem itself, or is that just the way the music went on that performance?
It's pretty much just free, I would say. But I mean, obviously we're coming from there, so guided in some way, but I mean, we're freely improvising at that point.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if the text, like the information in the text, there's something about that was so reminded me of going in a circle, so to speak, about the driving and the backing up and coming around. And as it spins on itself, I was wondering if that was kind of like a text that you thought about as you improvised, but I see it just came right out of the material itself, organically.
subconscious in there though.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, look, we're going to go into this last section, and I have to say this is really powerful for me, because it helped me recognize something about Albert Ayler's music, and it underscores it in a really wonderful way and recontextualizes it in something that shows how American his music was in the best way. And by American, I don't mean nationalistic BS American. I mean like American music, American art, what that means in the context we live in now and the context he was in. There's been a lot of conjecture about how his material, his original compositions, how they were generated, what was the source music for these sort of hymns, these anthems. I know that he was in Europe stationed as a soldier and was in Sweden, and there's conjecture that the Swedish folk melodies had a big hand in what Ayler started to compose. And that may be true and may be part of the picture, but definitely in the piece that happens now, where this goes, where it starts with this more traditional song, and how it generates into something that I connect without it being derivative in the least, but definitely I feel a kinship to Ayler's music, and the way you recontextualize both ends of this kind of aesthetic, let's say I associate with Ayler on some levels. I'm sorry?
I just want to affirm that I'm a huge Eiler fan. We're both
Yeah.
huge Albert Eiler fans.
Yeah, I had a feeling maybe based on this. Yeah, I mean, and it's so beautiful. It really, it on both, like I was saying, the melody, the traditional melody and the whole thing is so beautiful. And then when it's reflected back in this other context and vice versa, it really brings these things together in a very powerful way. It's a beautiful ending to the concert. And I just wanted to thank you. We're going to come back after this piece, and hopefully there'll be some questions. Again, please donate to me and Andy. Holodecks music is phenomenal, and if you've been listening and watching, I'm sure you agree. Please go to ess.org, and we'll be back after this next stretch. Please cue it up, Mr. Inglesian. And see, I turned on some more lights. Alex will be very proud of me. I'm not so glitchy right now, which maybe isn't a good thing. All right, Alex, yeah.
For a hungry crown.
And I said, okay, now repeat this every single day for the next 21 days.
And we'll yodel it over again. What will we do if we marry a tinker? Oh, true lovers, what will we do then? We will sell a tin can and walk on with me. And we'll yodel it over again.
when you're in, whatever.
We will take you by hand and walk on with me.
Play, whoever was in the house, everyone's on the stage. Well, she's for this particular junior box.
And we'll yo.
Died about 2 weeks before. Pain. The dog was in pain. Situation Find a moment in time as close to the time that you lost it or close to the time of the information that was presented. And then relive it, tell it as a story, and after you get all the facts, what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it sounded like, all the details, who was present, what were you talking about, all the facts, then ask, how are you feeling? And tell it out loud 5 to 10 times until you get bored, and then 5 times more. And then for at least 21 days. And it will release the information. If every time you go through the whole thing, you will, in fact, be pulling apart all the information and that down. I want you to know
Yeah, I love that ending. That ending is gold. That's just great. So good. I've been talking with Mia Friedman and Andy Allen of Holodeck for the last hour or so. You're listening to the Option Series, the archive interview portion of our programming this year. It's been great to have the two of you here and get to talk to you a little bit more. And I hope that we meet in person soon, talk about music here, do some playing hopefully too. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so
Music
much
is-
for having us. This is
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We're just saying thank you so much for having us.
Oh,
It's
great.
such a pleasure to be on this.
yeah. Let's see if there's some hey, Alex, Wizard of Oz of ESS. Do we have any questions for these guys other than me berating them continually? Oh, we do. Super. This is a question from, let's just say Rob, because I can't make out the whole thing. I'm curious if once something is recorded, then it's essentially settled into its final form. Is there any wiggle room still in how it's performed afterward, or is the documentation in the studio the final version?
It's a great question. I would say there's still a lot of wiggle room. It almost feels like a separate thing to me.
Even a great example, that song you just heard
Yeah.
was recorded with a B flat clarinet.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Oh, what's the piece, the song itself? What is that?
It's an Irish ballad. I
Okay.
think originally sung by a woman named Mary Delaney that I heard a few years ago and really loved.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really wow, and just the way you guys recontextualize it, but still it's so true to the source material, and it shows how flexible music is. You know, without it being like a conceptual conceit. It's just music that can move in all these different ways. Yeah, and provide such incredible source material. It's amazing. Alex, is there any other questions, or was that it from Rob about wiggle room? I think I have a place in my house which is called the Wiggle Room.
We all should have that.
I think we need one right now. Well, I guess that's it. One last time, if you have the ability to donate to Mia and Andy to celebrate their music with a little economic support, that would be phenomenal. Go to ess.org to donate. Thanks to Experimental Sound Studio. Thanks to Mia Friedman, Andy Allen, Holodeck. You guys are phenomenal. I'm so happy to get to talk to you a little bit right now. And I'm super excited to hear this third record and the fourth one. And on and on and on. Phenomenal.
Thank you for having us, Ken, and thank you to all of ESS and the Option Series. It's amazing.
And I just want to say also that the gig that you just heard back was such a highlight for us of one of the
phenomenal
shows we've ever played. I mean, I had one of my students ask me what's one of the best gigs you played recently, and I described this gig to him. So.
Oh, great. That makes me feel great. Yeah, it's a special series, and I really can't wait until we can convene again and things can happen as they're, originally intended. This is an amazing way to overcome a very difficult situation and keep things going and keep the creative input going. And I need it for sure, speaking personally. But I have to say, being involved in the Option Series and working with ESS, everyone there with Andrew Clinkman and Tim Daisy helping with the programming. I mean, it's really, I've been booking concerts for a long time in many different locations. But this particular thing at ESS has been a highlight for me. And definitely having you guys on the series was a huge, huge reason why. It's everything that I like about music. So thank you. And we'll be in touch, okay?
Yeah, huge shout out to Clinkman for hooking us up.
Oh, yeah. He needs it. He needs a shout out. Okay, guys, have a great week, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Thanks so much.
Okay, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thanks for being part of this.